Hey guys, Pastor Tim here. I hope you're ready for your second to last lesson in our Bible study series this year of More Than a Name. We are on lesson 12, all right, and today's Bible study is entitled No Name in Battle. All right, and our text for today's lesson is 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1 through 5, but then also we go into 1 Samuel chapter 14 as well, and you see that in your note takers. All right. One of the reasons God has or records so many battles in the Old Testament is because in the New Testament, we're reminded that the Christian life is a spiritual battle. We face a spiritual enemy. Ephesians chapter 6 says that, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, a well-known verse to many of you, I'm sure, describes the devil as our adversary who walketh about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Guys, if you are on this Christian journey, if you are in a relationship with Christ, you are going to face spiritual battles in your life, much like the Israelites faced a battle in our lesson today against the Philistines, who seem to be always the enemy of Israel at this time. But remember, no matter the obstacles you face, no matter the enemy, whether it be the devil or temptation from this world, whatever it is, you always have God on your side. And sometimes the Israelites, as we know in the Old Testament, forgot that point, but we shouldn't forget that ourselves. 1 John 4:4 says, "Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world." Our first main point for our lesson today is the obstacle. And our first point under that is a powerful adversary. Now, King Saul was the leader of the Israelites at this time. He was their first official king, and he himself was quite the man, all right? The Bible even describes him as head and shoulders above the rest of the Israelites. I don't know if that is a actual fact. I'm sure there was other tall Israelites, or maybe the children of Israel were all very short people. But he was a man of great stature. You look at this guy, you thought, you know what, he is a strong, powerful man. But when looking across the valley in the battle we see today, looking across and seeing the enemies, the Philistines, even though Saul has gathered up a couple thousand soldiers himself, the Philistines far outnumber them. All right. In our text, it says that they had 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sands which are on the seashore. All right. They were just numerous, multitudes of them. And seeing that, there was no human way that Israel was going to defeat this enemy. Now, relating to us today, we should not be surprised when we find ourselves, if we're choosing to follow God, we want to live for him, we shouldn't be surprised to find ourselves in the minority as well, facing a great obstacle. Matthew chapter 7 says, Enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be that go in thereat. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Guys, as Christians, you're going to find yourself multiple times being the minority going up against the majority when it comes to living for Christ, when it comes to issues of morality, when it comes to doing that which is righteous and not that which is sinful. Our second point under this is a pathetic army. The further we read into this account, it's not so much the might of the Philistines that stands out as it is the frailty of God's people. All right, they see this massive enemy in front of them, and one of the first things we see is that they're scared. They're living in fear. In our text, it says that in verse 6 and 7 that they hid themselves in caves and other places, and that even those that followed Saul were following him trembling. All right, they were fearful. They were definitely not thinking of God. They were thinking of, how can we ever defeat this great enemy? But understand that fear is never of God. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. The children of Israel that day, they forgot that fact. They were fearful of what they saw across the way. But not only were they fearful, they were also fickle. You guys hear me talk about this all the time, how mankind is very fickle by nature. You know, they like one thing one moment and then they dislike it the next. And as we go into chapter 14 of 1 Samuel, you'll see that there was also, in verse 21, Israelites that defected from Israel because they saw, you know what, I want to be on the winning side instead, and they go over into the Philistines. And when they start seeing what God's gonna do here with Jonathan and the unnamed armor bearer, when they see that the tide is turning against the Philistines, oh, they come back over to the Israelites. Man is fickle like that. They were fearful, they were fickle. It was a pathetic army indeed. Our second main point is the opportunity. Every obstacle is an opportunity to trust God, and it's an opportunity for God to show his miraculous power. And our first point under this is an impressive leadership. Israel needed a leader who would take action, not one that would act in fear. And that wasn't, surprisingly, that wasn't found in King Saul. It was actually found in King Saul's son, Jonathan. See, Saul's son, Jonathan, he took action. And leadership, guys, is not simply about position. It's not simply being the one at the top who's giving orders unto everyone else. You got to be willing to get in there and get your hands dirty as well, so to speak. We see in the New Testament, Christ shows forth leadership, but what he shows us is what we call servant leadership. Okay, guys, if you are ever put into a position of leadership yourself, don't just simply rest on your laurels and just command people to do this or that. No, get in there, get into trenches. Leadership is shown through action just as much as it's shown through commands. And Jonathan showed that. He saw the enemy and determined to act and see what God would do. Secondly, we not only see an impressive leadership, but we see an important lesson. See, Jonathan knew that God wasn't limited by the lack of numbers or by weapons or abilities. No, he knew God was great. We see in our text that he said, it may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord, to save by many, or to save by few. He knew God could use whatever he wanted to use. A great army, or as we see in our text today, just two simple men. And God actually loves being the underdog. His strength is shown through our weakness. In 1 Corinthians, which is what we're going through on our Wednesday lessons, as you guys know well, we just finished talking about how, you know, God has chosen the foolish things of this world to confound the wise, and the weak things of this world to confound those things which are mighty, for the ultimate purpose that no flesh should glory in themselves, that they glory in God. Okay? The important lesson is that, yeah, you know what? The army over there may be great, but God is greater, and God can use a small means to accomplish a great victory. And our last main point for this lesson is the obedience. There's the obstacle, there's the opportunity that obstacle presents, but there's also the obedience we must act in as well. See, Jonathan took leadership and trusted that God would deliver them, but he didn't do it alone. And this is when we finally come to our unnamed person in this account, his armor bearer. Our first main point under this is a humble following. See, this unnamed armor bearer followed his leader, Jonathan. The question is, are you willing to follow the leadership of God in your life? And not only that, are you willing to follow the leaders that God has placed in your life? Your parents, your pastors, your teachers, whatever it may be, God has put God-ordained leaders in your life to help steward you and lead you to follow God and grow in him. Hebrews chapter 13 says, remember them which have the rule over you, who have spoken unto you the word of God, whose faith follow, considering the end of their conversation. God has placed these people to help you grow as a Christian. Now, we understand, are human leaders perfect? No. Okay, are your parents perfect? Of course not. Are they supposed to be worshiped? Pastors? No, they're not supposed to be worshiped. Only God is perfect and worthy of our worship, but we are wise to follow with humility the God-ordained leadership that he has placed in our lives and provided for us, considering that they continue to faithfully follow God as well. All right, if the leaders that have been placed in your life start to falter and not faithfully following God, no, you don't continue to follow that. But like this armor bearer that we see in our text today, and as many of the leaders you have in your life as well, Jonathan was faithfully following God. Your pastor hopefully is faithfully following God. Your parents as well. Then you would do well to faithfully follow them. Our second point under this is an honorable faith. I'm sure as soon as the armor bearer decided that, you know what, Jonathan, I am going to follow you, his next question probably was, well, what's the plan? What is it that we are going to do with this great army that is against us? And Jonathan tells him, hey, we're going to go up. We're going to show ourselves to them. We're not going to hide it or anything. And if they say, hey, you wait there and we'll come unto you, all right, we're not going to move. All right, but if they say, hey, bring it on, come over here, show us what you got, then we understand that God has given the victory into our hands. See, this is faith in action. These two men, they had no plan B, only God's perfect will. There were thousands of ways to please God, but none of them is ever without faith, and that's what they were doing. Hebrews 11 says, but without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. See, God always knows where he's leading us, okay? There's nothing that takes him by surprise, and he will never lead us in the wrong direction. And Jonathan was trusting that God would give them the victory, and this unnamed armor bearer trusted in his leader, Jonathan, and in his leadership. Are you willing to fully trust God as the armor bearer trusted Jonathan to lead you in the battles of your life as well? Or are you going to be like the rest of the army, fearful and fickle? And our last point under this is a heavenly favor. If you guys get nothing else from today's lesson, I want you to get this. God always honors faith and trust in him. Always. All right. And we see that enacted in our account today. He honored the faith that Jonathan and his armor bearer placed in him. In Isaiah chapter 26, it says, that will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. And because of their faith and trust in God, God gave them an unbelievable victory. In 1 Samuel 14, 11 through 16, we read and we see that, yes, they get the answer that Jonathan, I'm sure, wanted to hear. Hey, yeah, you two, bring it on. The Philistines said, hey, come down unto us. And Jonathan told his armor bearer, you know what? God has given us the victory. And they went down. And what started out, what are you going to do against this great army? Well, this is what they did. They went down, and in a small area, they started doing what they could, all right? And they took out 20 of the Philistines. And then God showed a great miraculous work. They started to be fearful. And not only did the Philistines start to tremble, but God caused the earth to tremble as well. And the earthquake he allowed to ensue brought confusion amongst the Philistines. All right. I'm sure some of them were just scared and they wanted to run away because the ground is shaking underneath them. And in that turmoil, in that darkness, there was confusion, and some of them beat upon one another, accidentally killing their own. And some of them, I'm sure, accidentally killed their own by trying to run away from the skirmish and from this earthquake as well, trampling their own soldiers underneath them. But the amazing thing that happened after that is that the Israelite army, seeing that, oh, wait a minute, something's happening over there. What's going on? They see that this great army of the Philistines is starting to disperse. Well, this gives them courage, and they say, hey, let's assemble ourselves together and let's go after them and take them down. And the fearful were no longer fearful. The fickle, those that were on the other side, were like, hey, let's take this opportunity to have a victory for our country. And God gave them a great victory that day because of the influence that these two faithful men had on the rest of the army. Jonathan and his armor bearer, because of their faith, the result was thousands joined into the battle, and there was a great victory won for the Israelites that day. Now, no matter who we are or how well or little that we are known, like this armor bearer as opposed to Jonathan, we have influence that God can use as well. Whose faith will become stronger because of yours? All right, Jonathan and the armor bearer, the fearful, the fickle, their faith was strengthened and they jumped right into the battle. And you guys could have a similar impact on others in your life as well. In conclusion, guys, too often in life we focus on the obstacles ahead of us rather than on the opportunities. And we quit. That shouldn't be the case. But when we see our problems as big, our God will appear small. So flip that. When we see these obstacles, we need to view our God as big. Remember that God is greater. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And when we see God as big, our problems will appear far small in comparison. I hope you guys got all your blanks for today's lesson. I hope you guys were able to fill that out. As I said in Sunday school class, there's going to be a little break before our last lesson because all the Christmas things that are going on. We'll do that last in-person Bible study in January. Other than that, hope to see you guys in the next one. God bless.